Russian dictator Vladimir Putin threatens the West with a nuclear war. Meanwhile, the armed forces of Ukraine have successfully wounded a North Korean general in the Kursk region after the recent air attack by US-made missiles. And also Donald Trump has decided to change his nominees to work in his administration. So what is known about the recent threats from Russian dictator Vladimir Putin, and why does Donald Trump change his candidates for US Attorney General? Russian dictator Vladimir Putin threatened a nuclear strike on the West. He said that US authorization for Ukraine to use long-range missiles inside Russia give Russian Federation right to strike back and to attack even NATO military facilities deep inside the NATO territory. He said that during his latest TV address on the Russian state television. Also, Vladimir Putin said the recent strike on Ukraine was made by the new experimental long-range ballistic missile. As you know, yesterday, several days ago, Russia struck Dnipro with intercontinental ballistic missile. This statement was made by the Ukrainian Air Force. After that, there were some discussions that this strike would be made by the short and medium-range ballistic missile. Vladimir Putin confirmed that the strike was made by intermediate ballistic missile on Ukraine, which is experimental one. The United States has remembered and has said Ukraine beforehand about this Russian plans to strike deep inside the Ukrainian territory. That's why Ukraine knew about the strike. However, Russian dictator Vladimir Putin continues to threaten the West with a nuclear strike, with direct involvement in the war, because Biden has allowed Ukraine to strike back, and this is really ridiculous, because Ukraine has a right to strike deep inside Russia according to the international law, because Russia is aggressor in this situation. Russia has started illegal war against Ukraine. Not Ukraine, but Russia is aggressor in this situation. That's why Ukraine has a legitimate right to defend itself by striking military targets deep inside Russia by using any kind of weapons, even US-made and British one. Meanwhile, the expert of the Institute of Study of War believes that Vladimir Putin is bluffing because he has been threatening the West with a nuclear strike, with a big global war for many years. However, he did not realize his threats. It's all about his wars. Also, we have heard threats from Vladimir Putin after the US decision to provide Ukraine with tanks, armored vehicles, long-range missile systems, and other weapons. However, he did not do that, despite the fact that he has been threatening Ukraine with a nuclear strike, and even the West with a nuclear strike. It's interesting that Vladimir Putin probably forgot that the West also has its own nuclear arsenal. So at the same time, Institute of Study of War reports that these claims by Russian dictator Vladimir Putin are ridiculous and aimed to reduce support for Ukraine. Also, it is interesting that according to the Institute of Study of War, Russian dictator Vladimir Putin fears and cares only about strike on Russia, but not on Russian occupied territory. So according to the Institute of Study of War, after Ukraine has been already using ATACMS and British-made missiles to strike military targets inside Ukrainian occupied land on the east of Ukraine and in Crimea. However, after those strikes, Vladimir Putin did not warn the West about the nuclear war. However, after the first Ukrainian strikes deep inside the Russian Federation, inside the Russian region, Vladimir Putin has started to threaten the West with a nuclear strike, because these strikes by Ukraine on Russia are more painful for Russian dictator Vladimir Putin, because this is a big blow for him internally. It is a big blow for his reputation. That's why his strikes deep inside Russia are so useful for Ukraine, and according to President Zelensky, Ukraine can use the strikes to put more pressure on Vladimir Putin, to force Russia to participate in negotiations inside Russia, to negotiate with Russia a long and lasting peace. But it is possible only by putting more pressure on Russia. That's why the West should double down support for Ukraine, provide Ukraine with additional weapons to allow Ukraine to strike deep inside Russia, even with more range before Donald Trump enters the office. There are lots of expectations that Donald Trump can even turn against Vladimir Putin and double down support for Ukraine after he realized that Vladimir Putin will not ready to a peaceful settlement of this war, but we have to see. Meanwhile, the North Korean general was wounded in the recent strike of Ukraine, according to the Wall Street Journal. So Wall Street Journal reports that North Korean general has been wounded in the recent strike. So Ukraine has used British-made Storm Shadow cruise missiles for the first time since the beginning of the full-scale war on Russian territory. 10 missiles have struck Russian military installations in the Kursk region. The strike was made to Vladimir Putin's presidential bunker, and North Korean officers as well as Russian officers have participated in planning its command structure, in planning its war effort in the Kursk region. So Ukraine has successfully eliminated dozens of Russian and North Korean officers, and we have now confirmation that at least one North Korean general was wounded after this strike by the Ukrainian armed forces, and that's how Ukraine can really put more pressure on Putin to force him to participate in a long-standing negotiations with Ukraine to end this war peacefully. At the same time, Reuters reported that Russia has provided to North Korea missiles for its anti-aircraft system, and this is a big escalation because South Korea should react and instead provide Ukraine with its own weapons, because Russia is strengthening military capabilities of its enemy, of the North Korea. That's why South Korea should act and allow Ukraine to use its weapons deep inside Russia and to provide Ukraine with lethal aid. That's why the deterrence could be restored by the South Korean government and the South Korean intelligence agency. And in the end of our conversation, we will cover the internal politics of the United States. So Donald Trump has decided to remove Matt Gaetz from his nominee to lead the U.S. Department of Justice. This has been reported by CNN. So Matt Gaetz should become the next Attorney General. However, the American U.S. senators have convinced Matt Gaetz to step down and to remove his his nomination in this race for U.S. Attorney General, because there were some accusations about his links with more than under 18 years old girls and other illegal activities. That's why members of the U.S. Senate have convinced him to remove his nomination in this race. Also, it's really interesting on whether Pete Hegseth, Trump's nominee for U.S. Defense Secretary, would eventually become the U.S. Defense Secretary, because he does not have military experience, and there are lots of concerns among Republicans about his nomination. However, U.S. Senate should approve all Donald Trump's nominations, so there are lots of questions on whether Pete Hegseth would move forward through the U.S. Senate without any questions, and maybe U.S. senators will also try to convince him to step down and to choose another more appropriate candidate to lead the most powerful army, military power in the world during the high-stakes crisis and lots of wars around the globe. That's all for today. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, stay with us on YouTube, and glory to Ukraine!